I want to kind of start at the basics and make this an informative conversation. And, we'll tell stories along the way, I'm sure,
Sure.
of your experiences in NIL.
There's plenty of them.
But yeah, I'm sure. Start with this. 502 Circle is the official NIL collective at University of Louisville. What exactly is 502 Circle, and how do you guys actually manage and come up with revenue to pay athletes?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And up until about a month ago, that looked a lot different, right? Like there were a lot of different conversations that happened throughout the course of the day that have now shifted. And a lot of it's more university payment driven, but ultimately the 502 Circle is an NIL collective. Right? Straight up, straightforward. We were a third party entity over the last 3 years that has facilitated, I would say 99% of payments distributed to Louisville athletes, whether that was football, men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball, across the board. We facilitated majority of those payments. The reason for that is because up until last month, when the House vs. NCAA settlement passed, the NCAA didn't allow for universities to pay athletes directly. Where now that the House settlement's gone through, $20.5 million, each school is now allowed to distribute that out to their athletes through revenue sharing NIL payments. So the collective was the day-to-day facilitator of all those payments. Typically in the, like you said, in the tens of millions of dollars over the last few years. And we've grown from literally, I think the day that I started, I laugh about this with our group here. Like we started with $12,000 in a bank account. And I remember vaguely, all of us sitting around a table, and Mark Spiegel at the time, him and I were joking, like in a year from now, we're not going to be able to afford, anyone on the roster with $12,000. Yeah. Right. And things grew over the course of a 3-year period into, basically assisting football and men's basketball pretty heavily in building out what their roster is going to look like throughout the course of the year. So we dove in, we took on a little bit of a front office approach. We were really innovative in that process. And now it's transitioned to where the school is picking up a majority of those bills to pay the athletes, right? Now that the House vs. NCAA settlement's passed. And we're still operating, assisting them on some of the front office type responsibilities, helping them identify players, helping them recruit players, and ultimately build a roster that we feel like is competitive enough to win a national championship. And I think we've done a great job of that. Football and men's basketball here at Louisville, I think, are in situations that it's kind of up to them now. Basketball's got a roster that should open the year in the top 5, and football is going to compete to play in the college football playoff. You've got women's basketball have a top 25 roster, and baseball just got done in the World Series, and volleyball just lost in the national championship game. So we've had a lot of success. Our AD, Josh Hurd, and his team have done an unbelievable job of putting NIL on the forefront. And across the country, and this may be new for a lot of your audience, not a lot of schools and collectives collaborated very well throughout this process. Yeah. There was conflict. A lot of times schools felt like collectives were taking on a lot of attention or power. Collectives felt like schools weren't getting with the times and making quick and efficient enough decisions for their programs to have success in the NIL space. And I would say from the jump at Louisville, that was not the case. We did an unbelievable job of, the second that NIL became a thing, everyone sat around a table and knew that in a few years, this was going to be a recruiting advantage. And how do we get in front of that? How do we provide opportunities now that change the game? And I think we were fortunate. We did it. We put our sports in a good spot to continue to have success, and hopefully it'll have some sustainability here over the next few years.
It's funny. You just mentioned the collectives and the schools working together. It is interesting because there is a lack of alignment there just naturally. You think about collectives that have been trying to raise money from donors to pay the athletes over the last few years of college sports. A lot of times, those are the same donors that were giving to the school previously.
Sure. Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And you have the internal fundraising department at the school that wants that money staying with the school so they can pay for facilities and scholarship funds and all that stuff. Now it's getting pulled to NIL because, hey, we got to pay our players and it's only legal if it goes through the collective, and we need the competitive advantage. and it creates this kind of push and pull. But the reality is, I think Mike Loxley, head coach of Maryland, said it best. He said they just did a facility upgrade at University of Maryland, and he said, "Oh, we missed the timing on this because our guys would get changed in a trash can for $500,000. You know, like they don't care what the facility looks like anymore. But you guys, I feel like we're so good at the alignment. How do you balance the stakeholders you have to play with and play in the sandbox with? It's the athletic department, it's the donors, it's the athletes, and building trust with those athletes themselves as well.
Yeah, it's a difficult concept, but from the beginning, Josh has done a great job with our team setting the tone that this was going to be about the athlete, right? This isn't about all of us. None of that group is, not coaches, not athletic directors. You're not sitting on the top of the float when you win a national championship, right? Like, let the guys have their moment. At the end of the day, the goal is to get guys here, bring athletes to campus that are going to compete for national championships. And, we're going to put our resources towards investing that into the athlete. Our stadium, our facilities, they're world class, probably lined up really well from a timing standpoint. When I started at Louisville, working in fundraising it was almost 8 years ago now, we were just finishing an expansion to the football stadium. So, $60+ million expansion that it looks unbelievable. We got a great stadium. We got the Yum Center downtown, basketball practice facilities, one of the best in the country. So we had the facilities in place, and we just kept telling our donors, like, hey, for years, you've always contributed to support our athletes, and you wanted them to go win championships. You want the brand, the city to be alive and well. And we're the pro team here, right? So when our teams win, the city is vibrant. Like, there's a better mood. When Louisville basketball wins on a Tuesday night, like, people are more pleasant around the city on Wednesday morning, right? So yeah. For us, it's been really cool to watch our donors jump on board. They embraced NIL, and those same donors that are given to the athletic department, like, they're still supporting the NIL efforts because they know how important it is for us to win, and they know how important it is for the city to continue to grow the way that we need it to. So it's been fun, man. There's not a lot of collision there, like at a lot of schools, but I think that's why we've been successful in the NIL space. And the schools that have done it at a really high level, they've collaborated well and done it with the right people in their corner.
I want to ask about some numbers. And I'm going to preface this with, I'm not asking you, unless you want to share exact numbers at Louisville, because I think that probably is something you can't divulge. But I am curious of just the marketplace in college sports. I know you have your pulse on what a lot of programs around the country are spending. Sure. I'm sure you're comparing notes with other collective presidents, other general managers. What do you think coming, let's say in 2026, the combined spend between revenue share and outside the cap NIL, so total payments that to athletes, top tier college football programs will spend come next season?
We're always benchmarking ourselves against schools that we're competing against in the recruiting process and in the conference, out of the conference, no matter what that is. Like, for us to compete at a national championship level, you got to know what's going on in the market. In my opinion, there's a lot of really inflated numbers out there. Everybody, they puff their chest and act like they're spending all this money, and that's great. But really, when you break down like the nuts and bolts of this thing, there's definitely outliers, right? There are definitely schools that I think are spending well beyond that $20.5 million going into next year. And I think we'll continue to do that in creative and strategic marketing ways. They're going to set an advantage for their athletes, right? I would say Texas Tech, Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, some of those blue blood football schools, because realistically, football has a massive roster. And for you to be extremely deep and competitive on the football side, you got to spend money. Like, you don't need a brain surgeon to figure that one out, right? Like, the more money you spend, the more good players you get, which means then when guy one goes down, guy two is ready to step up and compete. So I would say that on the football side, if you're able to spend that full revenue share plus probably $3 to $5 million, you're going to be really competitive. You have a chance to compete for those college football playoff spots. So
to clarify for everyone, that would be $20.5 million plus a few million, you're saying?
Yeah, that $25 million range. I think you'll see a lot of those SEC schools jump into the pot, and they'll be really competitive in that range, man. And then with that, you got to think, like, there's still basketball on top of that, right? So schools that are trying to be competitive in basketball, you're going to be, $5 to $8 million at a minimum. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the House versus NCAA settlement plays out. I think that they're going to do a really nice job of restricting some of the rules and regulations around it. It's just a matter of, man, it's been going on in college sports for years. How do schools find an advantage? And there's always going to be a new way to do this, a new way to create an advantage for your athletic department. And how I guess you'd say, how much risk are you willing to take on in doing that?
Yeah.
I think it's all going to depend on what the College Sports Commission does and what type of penalties they're laying down. But it sounds like there's going to be some penalties around. If you do have issues with outside the cap payment, there's going to be, they're going to pull money back off your cap space. So if you're going into a year and you've now got, instead of 20 and a half, you got 18 and a half, that's going to hurt. Right. And if it's multiple years in a row, it's ultimately going to be
And
really expensive for you to bring athletes to campus.